Welcome to episode 29 of the Princeton Podcast with Mayor Mark Freda. In this episode, Mark caught up with Dr. Aly Cohen, Integrative Rheumatologist, author, speaker, community educator, podcaster, and founder of The Smart Human, an organization designed to inform the public about environmental health concerns and practical solutions to help minimize chemical exposures. Aly discussed her educational background, as well as her collaboration with Princeton school teachers to help their teenage students learn more about the wide variety of unregulated chemicals found in the many personal hygiene products they use, an experience that helped inspire Aly to found the Smart Human organization. Mark and Aly also discussed the book she co-authored with Frederick von Saal entitled Non-Toxic: Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World, that examines how to reduce our chemical and radiation exposures by recognizing potential threats and paying attention to what we eat, breathe, and put onto our skin. So without any further introduction, let's join our host, Mark Freda, and his guest, Dr. Aly Cohen, for episode 29 of the Princeton Podcast.
Aly, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we start talking about a Smart Human and other efforts you're involved in, I would like to set the stage a little bit for our listeners as to why they should listen to you. So my first question is, can you outline some of your educational background for us? Because I just think it's important for people as we get into more topics to understand why you're so good at what you do.
Well, I appreciate that. And when you said why people should listen to you, I directly thought of my children and I thought they don't listen to me. So maybe you could talk to them after this. I would like to begin by saying I started off in my career as, a young person wanting to be a physician. Even in second grade, I have some reports on the heart and all sorts of crazy stuff. My dad's a doctor. And I kind of went through the whole medical, training and your typical, 30-year process to get to be a doctor. And it turned out that it just wasn't enough as a Western internist and rheumatologist. It was fascinating and interesting, but it was lacking in certain areas that I missed in med school, which was nutrition training and how, environment affects health. And I ended up taking some extra training with Dr. Andrew Weil at the Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine, which is now the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine, which is a 2-year fellowship. In integrative medicine, science-based, evidence-based, board certification is required to be an integrative medicine physician, in case people don't know that. And then that also took on a life of its own when I got into environmental chemicals. So all of this layering on of education brought me to where I am now. And I really feel that this is sort of the best time in my life to be able to speak and to talk about science and environmental health. So, it was an unconventional journey towards this last part of it, but I'm certainly loved all of what I've learned so far.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting journey from what you had sent me some information ahead of time, and I read up on you as people can. But anyway, I think you have a very interesting career and a life. But could you share with us some of the different organizations you are or you have worked with during this journey?
So early in my career, I guess in the integrative medicine portion where I was learning a lot of environmental health in the program, which was a 2-year program, I actually got stumbled into environmental health through a story about my dog getting sick. And he was a 4.5-year-old golden retriever. He was beautiful. And he got sick, and I just thought he had swallowed a sock or something else that Goldens often do. And it turned out at 4.5 that he had autoimmune hepatitis, and he had really no liver left. So as an autoimmune disease specialist, of course, as a rheumatologist, I was really quite heartbroken and stunned. But I learned about his environment and trying to figure out how his immune system turned on him, his water, his air quality, his dog food, his rubber toys that he used to chew on constantly. And I really think that laid the groundwork for kind of getting into the environmental health aspect. And so that's kind of laid out a lot of what I've done. Now, in the beginning of that learning process, I reached out to Environmental Working Group. If people know what that is, the EWG.org, very well known as a reputable, consumer driven advocacy group for environmental health. So their stuff is very vetted in terms of their information, their rating systems for skin products and cosmetics and cleaning products. They have a great trove of rated material for toxicity. And early on, that was my only resource, trying to figure out what might have affected my dog. And so as I reached out to them and sent them my slides and said, I'm doing some local, talks. I'm very interested in this. Could you just make sure my slides are correct? That took on a whole life of its own because they had never had a doctor at that time, about 10 years ago, reach out to say, getting involved in environmental health and endocrine disruption and all the effects of health of certain chemicals. So I ended up doing a lot of CME, which is continuing medical education, for 2 years around the country. So I worked with them on that project. They educated me. And then I also ended up meeting Fran Drescher out west at a lunch at a restaurant with my kids and my husband. And I had seen her years before in Beth Israel Hospital when she was getting treated for uterine cancer. So I walked over. Of course, I was nervous, and I started talking to her and, told her what I was up to and she was lovely. And since then, we've had a relationship where, I work with her on many projects, and I've been on her health summit, and I'm on her medical advisory board now. So a lot of chance issues and, encounters that really brought me to working with some phenomenal nonprofit groups like EWG. Cancer Schmancer is her program, which is a cancer prevention and advocacy group. And there's several others, but, I tend to choose very vetted groups. I really want to work with people who are based in science, who, really do great educational work. And that's kind of how I've ended up doing the projects I'm doing.
That's great. I believe you also have a TED Talk and you also lecture on a regular basis. So could you tell us a little bit more about all that?
Yeah, the TED Talk was really, I want to say, fun towards the end. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. I, worked hard to get involved with the TED Talk, and I actually got rejected from one program, and I learned from it, and I learned how to reshape my messaging and rewrite the words, and I tried out for another, and it's basically a combination of being pulled in and also putting yourself out there. And it took about 6 months to a year to put that together. And it turns out to be like a 14-minute, I think mine's 13 minutes and then maybe a half, stand up, memorized, speech of sorts, entertaining, of course. And my talk was actually called How to Keep Your Kids Safe from Toxic Chemicals. And, the punchline, I hope people will watch it on YouTube. You just type in my name and on YouTube, or how to protect your kids from toxic chemicals, I think it is. It's meant to educate people to be aware. It's not meant to judge. It's not meant to lecture technically. It's meant to show people the story of my dog, how we really do bathe ourselves in products that are not tested for any safety or toxicity by any manufacturers. And people find that very hard to believe, like I did. It took about 7 to 8 years to really believe that, know that, and talk to the researchers that know that and write papers on that internationally. So, now that I know that that's true, I feel very compelled to tell people not only what they should know, but also how to fix the problem. So a lot of what I do is empowerment. I teach high school classes. I'll get involved with curriculum at different programs, different colleges and high schools. And I wrote 40 some hours for physician colleagues. So it's reframing a lot of the same environmental health material into age appropriate nuggets and curriculum. What was interesting about the TED Talk, which is pertinent to Princeton, is that back in the day, if people know Cherry Sprague, I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, I reached out to her and I said, can I do a pilot project? This is about 2014. And I explained to her I wanted to, see how much information the kids knew in environmental health, whether it's, soccer turf risk or drinking water or even their personal care products. Of course, they use tons of them. And I said, could I please come in and create a program where, I do a bunch of lectures and test pre and post. And that went so well. She said, come on in. And I was just so appreciative. I think I worked with, a couple of the teachers that were particularly interested and had access to a bunch of different classes and age groups and did these pre and post tests. And the basis of those answers became the TED Talk, so I hope people will listen to that. But essentially, I had really open arms from her. And she's since retired. I ended up doing another pilot project with them in 2016 as well to retest my theory that kids want this information. And certainly it came out I was convinced of that, and the data showed that. So, now my mission has really been, as the TED Talk will say, is to really educate people, but particularly young people, teenagers especially, because they are they use the most personal care products of any demographic daily. So they use on average about 17 products versus adults, women who use about 12 and men use 6 daily. And so they also use chemicals on their skin that have endocrine effects, so hormone effects. And who has the greatest, ups and downs of hormone swings, I can attest to that with my kids, is teenagers. So you have this group of kids that use the most products that could be potentially affected the most by the chemicals they use on, in, and around their bodies. And so that's the age group where you can get into their heads before they may want to have a family one day, where these chemicals may have an effect in fertility or even in cognitive effective fetuses. So the idea was really to get this young, interested, tech savvy, highly hormonal group of people to listen. And it's been very fruitful.
Amazing. So there's 2 topics I want to make sure we spend some time on today. One is the book you co-authored, Non-Toxic Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World, and your Smart Human effort. So can we talk a little bit about the book first?
Yeah, sure. So that book is I want to say I gave birth to several pets and 2 human children, but I would say that this book is one of my offspring. It is a work that took about, I would say, 8 to 10 years, because it was me culminating my process of cleaning up my environment, my drinking water and its quality, my air quality, and getting rid of all these plugins and candles that are synthetic and all sorts of chemicals that affect my air quality. It was a process learning how food labels work, and which food additives are harmful or not, and what's the regulatory failures in that area. So it was, soccer turf and sports turf, how we need to know more about these synthetic sports turfs and how they are being linked to a whole host of health issues, but how to manage them responsibly. I have kids that love sports, that are on those fields. So, I looked at that as a journey. And so it took about 7 to 8 years, more or less, to build up not just what the problem is in my brain and understand the science and convey that appropriately, but also to understand all of the things that we can do to reduce exposures and reduce body burden of these harmful chemicals, and what that means in terms of lowering risk for human health diseases. And so it was quite a journey. I reached out to a scholar who I had read all of his medical journal articles on bisphenol A, BPA, Dr. Frederick von Saal. And I cold called him and I said, I have this book deal. I work with Andrew Weil, who gave me this book deal to partner with a researcher. He wouldn't let me do it alone. Surprise, surprise, as a clinician. And I said, you're my 8th call. Would you be interested? He said, email me over the outline, which I did, and he was on board immediately. And here's a really hardcore bench researcher who believes in this work and this information. And so we've partnered for a textbook, Integrative Environmental Medicine, which is part of the Andrew Weil academic series with Oxford University Press. And then we did this consumer book, which was remarkable because it's a combination of a bench researcher, a grandfather, a world-renowned BPA and endocrine disruptor researcher, and myself, who's an autoimmune and environmental health clinician who sees patients regularly. So it was just a beautiful combo. And he's one of my favorite people in the world and my mentor. So hats off to Fred von Saal. So that's the book. And it's done incredibly well, having had not much PR behind it. It's sold quite well and had even, I think it's on its 4th printing. But it's a guidebook. And it was we fought very hard for the word guidebook. And it was meant to really get people to handhold them through all of these, topics, drinking water and air quality and home furnishings and EMF, radiation and tech toys. There's a whole chapter on that. Medications, I have a whole chapter on. Not that I'm against medications, but I'm, want people to be thoughtful and judicious about, the use of medications. And here are some of the more common ones and what they have potential risk for, so that you can really discuss that with your physician. So it's really filled with lots of practical, good, information that anyone could pick up. Any high schooler all the way through grad school could really pick up and really just, put into play lots of great practices. The Smart Human came out of frustration. That's my social media platform. So I meant to make sure it was open to every human being. The Smart Human is anthropology-based name because I love anthropology. And really, it's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I have my own podcast, The Smart Human, where I interview really remarkable people in environmental health and, environmental lawyers and, legislators and physicians. And so it's kind of like my treat to be able to reach out to people and get their voices heard, which, often they're not, if they're in research especially. So that's how this all started. It was frustration and interest, and it's taken me to some really interesting places.
Yeah, it's quite a journey, and I guess you never sleep or eat because you're just, you just crank it out so much.
I do sleep because my integrative medicine training tells me that my immune system will be much more robust. And in fact, we don't have much of a social life, my husband and I, because we really do go to bed at 9 and get up at like 5 or 5:30. So, we've had to curtail some of the fun stuff of youth, but, we can always, take these meals and see people socially earlier. But yeah, no, it's been a nice journey. My husband's involved. He's a physician also, so he does a lot of this work as well. So it's been a real nice journey to be able to do that with him as well.
That's a big advantage, having you both interested in similar things and helping each other, supporting each other.
Same language. Yep.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That and getting actually enough sleep most nights. That's pretty amazing.
That helps.
You're ahead of almost all of us now. So, Aly, we've covered a lot about you professionally, but let's just talk about you, the person, a little bit, if we can. Where'd you grow up?
So I am a Princeton person. I grew up in Washington's Crossing in Yardley. We were some of the earlier kids that were sort of bussed in, because it's quite a commute. But it was a really important aspect of my parents. My dad's a doctor, my mom's an educator, PhD in education, and they really just wanted me to be at, really good schools. So they traveled and I went to PDS actually, most of all of my young life. I was a lifer. And I just really support the school. I think Princeton is a remarkable place. The more I've left to train or left to travel, the more I think of how lucky I am to be part of this community. The schools are great. The people are great. I just think that it's just such a nice combination of philosophies and cultures and religions really living well together. So, I probably took it for granted growing up in this area, but now I'm very clear on the fact that it's a wonderful place to live and work.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people that either grew up here or spent a fair amount of time here, they go away, they come back, and it's a common theme that a lot of them say is, I didn't realize how special Princeton is with the diversity of, there's just so much diversity here. And I guess we do take it for granted, but you go other places and you say, oh, okay, wait a minute. Well,
right. Most of my high school friends, a lot of them have come back to this area, raising their kids in the schools in the Princeton area. It's just really nice.
Yeah. And are you still in the general Princeton area?
Yeah, we're in the suburbs of Princeton, and we just love being able to kind of like go 10 minutes into town to have dinner and, utilize all the great new restaurants, which we didn't really have growing up. I thought there was we had Chuck's, like everyone knew Chuck's and, the Menendezes and all those crazy stories. But we didn't have much offerings, and I think that's really exploded in the last, 15, 20 years since I've been in the area.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of restaurants. There's a lot of good reasons, plug for Princeton. There's a lot of good reasons for everyone listening to come into Princeton every day. So anyway, but your office, is your office in Princeton?
Yeah, my practice is in Princeton. I used to be, sort of south towards Freehold where I was on staff. I actually still am on staff down there. But I really wanted to be close to my kids who go to school in Princeton and, made that conscious choice to be close to them because one of us had to be, because my husband, he's got his stuff. But Princeton is a unique environment. Someone told me that it has a certain cachet for understanding health and wellness. That's probably true, from a knowledge base or maybe at a socioeconomic level. But it's remarkable that there's been nothing but open arms to the philosophy that I follow, which is, really to do the best medicine, but incorporating as much as available in ancient medicine, Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine, all the way through to herbal medicines, understanding how medicines work and to use them not so reflexively and see what the alternatives are in terms of nutrition and diet and exercise and stress management and all of the things that give human beings anthropologically helps them thrive. So, that has been embraced. But as obviously an autoimmune disease doctor and rheumatologist, I use all the medications that are available when needed. And they're wonderful. Many of them have, if not all of them, do some really remarkable work when it comes to some serious diseases. Doesn't mean they always have to be used. It doesn't mean they always have to be used in those doses. It doesn't mean they can't improve with other things added on integratively. So I just think that that's been embraced in the Princeton area more than it was when I was practicing maybe even 20 minutes south, believe it or not.
Right. Yeah. Balance, moderation. There's so many areas in life. It just makes sense. So, you're involved in so much. And I know you just said you have an office, you have a practice. But you do find time to see patients? I just don't understand how you're able to do that.
No. I'm very organized. I'm probably the most organized human being you'll ever meet. And I think that's more out of survival mechanism because managing kids and all their stuff and spouse, and I have 2 pets at home and, a household and a practice that I really run myself and then doing all this extra work. But what I've really tried to do is keep my practice at a level where it doesn't run me. And that goes into the whole training of work and life and stress. Is it worth extra money to work harder, to work more days? Or is it something I can give up a bag or a trip or to really make sure that my quality of life is good and that I'm actually there for my kids now that, these are the formative years. So I do see patients and I see them, 2 to 3 days a week, very heavy days, but I have these other days to sort of support those patients and their labs and their doctors, and then also to do all these other projects that, really bring me a lot of joy because they're so creative in their, production, so to speak.
Amazing. So looking at all you've accomplished, I mean, what has driven you to achieve all that you have achieved? I mean, the list is...
Low self-esteem? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, aren't we always trying to figure out who we're trying to please? I mean, my parents are older, but they still get a kick out of everything I'm doing. I just realized that I'm not so much doing it for them anymore. Although I love that they're around and they're proud of what I'm doing. I try to teach this to my kids that you have to love what you do. You have to feel good about your grade. You're not getting good grades for us, although right now my 13-year-old might argue that's the case. But, ultimately in life, you have to, and I say this to them, look in the mirror at the end of the day and be happy with who you are and what you accomplished that day and can't cut corners. And these were a lot of the tenets that my parents taught me. My dad especially, I would say, who's 83 and still practicing nephrology. In fact, today's, Friday. He's probably at his dialysis unit that I stopped by. I mean, I think that that's the kind of integrity that we all strive to either have or at least, identify and be part of if we can get a piece of it. So yeah, I mean, I think that, when you love what you do, it's not work, right? That, but I think you have to carve out that joy. You have to carve out anything you need that fills your soul. You have to make sure it happens for you because otherwise you lose yourself. And I've tried very hard not to lose that.
That's a great philosophy. It's a great way to look at things because I think so many people do, I got this great career. Oh, okay, is it really all that great? I'm commuting or I'm making lots of money or I'm doing this, but are you satisfied? Are you happy? Are you doing what you really want to do?
And if you can find pocketbooks that are knockoffs that are really good looking, then you don't have to spend for the real ones. And there you go. You have a whole nother day to play with. So, it's all a matter of perception. I think when you get older, things change. You start to, and I'm not that old, but I really do believe that having simple pleasures in life is a really good way to judge, in terms of, what you strive for. I think it's worked for me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good advice. So can you share how our listeners can find out more of the advice you offer?
Sure. The Smart Human platform has expanded. Facebook has, I think, 51,000 followers on it now. Legitimate. I don't buy any followers. That's another shtick that people do. But I do believe that is a really wonderful place. If you do have Facebook to follow, it's called The Smart Human. It has to have the and then space, then smart, then human. That has been really solid in terms of what I post Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Friday is a lot of mental health, a lot of humor, a lot of great sayings, a lot of great information. Monday and Wednesday tend to be more biologic and nutrition and physiologic and sustainability and how the environment plays a key role in human health as well. So Facebook's great. TikTok, I just got on board, right? You're no one unless you're on TikTok. So I'm starting to really do, some great clips that are really high yield and to the point on TikTok. And I think it's gaining a lot of traction. Instagram, of course, the Smart Human Podcast, as I mentioned earlier, has really remarkable guests that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to interview. I mean, just really like Fran Drescher was on my guest, Art Kaplan, who's a world-renowned bioethicist. I just had Robert Lustig, who's an endocrinologist, very well known out of UC California, and he's really brilliant about sugar and metabolism. And so I'm starting to pick up some really, I have amazing people, but just people that might have been more well known, I guess. And so that's a wonderful place for people to get extra information on any number of topics.
My next question was more about the social media, but you just kind of covered, Facebook, Instagram,
Twitter, all of that stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's really, look, as much as I preach about reducing anxiety and stress and staying off social media, the fact is, if you're going to educate people, you have to meet them where they're at. And that's social media. And hopefully people just have a healthy and responsible way of using it. But I would love to be part of people's, regimen so that they could feel that they're getting real useful information.
Right. And then I just want to jump back. So the TED Talk, which is on YouTube, I think you said.
Yes.
So people could find links to that through your different social media.
Yes. YouTube actually has the Smart Human channel, and which has lots of other videos and podcasts that I've done, but also the TED Talk is there. But how to protect your kids from toxic chemicals is the name of it, but you can simply just go to YouTube and type in Aly Cohen and it should pop up right at the top.
And you said the book's in the 4th printing, so obviously still available. So people
still available. And I just got another book deal as of yesterday. So that's going to connect my goal with that book. I'm very excited about is connecting not just environmental chemicals and human health with environmental health chemicals with immune system disorders and autoimmunity, which is really going to tie in my rheumatology training. The previous book had a lot of information about the endocrine system and hormones, because that's really where the basis of the data has been thus far. We now have so much information about how autoimmune diseases, like my dog's autoimmune disease and my patients and all of the number, MS and Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So I'm going to be really talking and focusing in on the immune system with environment. So that'll be coming out hopefully within the next year and a half.
That's great. And I just want to mention the name of the book again, so people could easily remember it, hopefully, and get it. Non-toxic Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World. So I don't want people to forget that. So do you have other upcoming initiatives, talks, or other things you want to tell us about?
God. Well, how do you top talking to the mayor of Princeton? I mean, I think it's all downhill from here. But I have a conversation I had with Dr. Andrew Weil on his podcast. I think it's Body of Wonder. And so I'm starting to pick up, and that's on, YouTube and all that stuff, but I'm starting to pick up really great venues where there's a lot more visibility. Nothing specific, but just podcasts whenever. And it's interesting. I get a lot of requests today. I have Instagram Live with 2 young college students at Elon University who just reached out to me. And so I'll pretty much say yes to anyone young who wants me to do anything, because to me, they are the least toxic and the most appreciative of everything that I'm doing. And so I certainly, I'm happy to do school, lectures. And, I've been doing some talks in the Princeton area at some of the local schools. So I encourage people and teachers and administrators to reach out if they would like to hear more information about these topics.
Which is great. It's also great to hear that, younger people are actually eager to listen. Looking around, I think people want to learn. People want to know what's really healthy.
It's given me great hope. I'll be honest with you. When I did those pilot projects, I really didn't know what I was going to get. The whole point of why I started to consider it was because my babysitter at the time said, "Hey, is my shampoo toxic?" Because she had just seen, some of the work I was looking at, and I thought, "Oh my God, doctors aren't even asking me that at these meetings and these lectures. Why am I not listening to young people who really do want to hear about what they put on in and around their body?" So, I'm very hopeful, working with young people. I think a lot of people say this, it gives them hope because they're so inquisitive and so smart and so capable. And I think I'm just trying to help them be capable in preventing health issues and disease and to have really healthy lives. So I've been really happy about it.
Yeah, you should be. That's a great goal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
We appreciate your time. And I also just want to make sure I mention a thank you to Princeton Podcast, which puts on our podcast, and our great producer. I can't remember his name, though.
Thank you for joining us for the 29th episode of the Princeton Podcast, produced by the podcast production team at HG Media, providing audio, video, and website design services here in Princeton since 1999. If you enjoyed this episode of the Princeton Podcast, please share it with your friends. Visit our website at princetonpodcast.com and be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.